Yeah, welcome to the Africa for Almans podcast, this week with episode number 31. And we're joined from London by my friend Yasmine, who will tell us more about her home country, Morocco. Enjoy. Welcome to Africa for Almans. This week, joined from London, by Yasmine Chandid. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
It was very correct. Yes, sir.
Yes, very welcome to the show. Yeah, it's a very nice coincidence we meet at this moment, because I think we have somewhat of a in Germany we would say jubileum, or like a reunion after 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very well our debating tournament in Moscow. It's a funny coincidence. Now things come back together. Yeah, it's very nice. You found the time at the place, and you are now in the UK. Wow, that's very cool.
Thank you. I mean, I'm very happy to reconnect again. Obviously, it's been 4 years, as you said, and the circumstances in which we met were as well extraordinary. I mean,
absolutely. And Moscow is truly one hell of a place. I think people don't give it enough credit. Yeah, it seems always this darkish thing.
I agree.
But
I love it. Definitely. I personally am in love with the city. I love it.
Have you ever been back there? No, it was also your only visit, right?
No, I've never been back there. But I mean, I would love to go back and visit more of Russia in general.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that. A large motivation for my podcast actually was another host who also has his own podcast. He's a German living in Moscow, and he keeps he motivated me also to publish it, and he keeps telling me, there's these places here and there. I think the next time we go, it will be much different. Yeah, it's a very fascinating place. But that's not what we should get involved too much about. Morocco is today's topic, and it's a very historically, and let's say in also in the North African world, a very unique country. And maybe to get us a bit started, could you maybe tell us a bit of the geographic location of Morocco, where
Absolutely.
we are exactly?
So, Morocco is a northern African country.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually one of the highest peaks of Africa. It's bordering the North Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, between Algeria and Mauritania at the bottom. Obviously, the Western Sahara is a problematic region.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I think that is also something people always get confused with.
I just want to say it's one of the only 3 nations, along with Spain and France, to have both the Atlantic and Mediterranean coastlines.
True. Yeah, exactly. They have both. Yeah.
It has around 3-4 million citizens at the moment. It's about 710,000 square kilometers with the Occidental Sahara. And it's, much of the landscape is actually mountainous with slopes that gradually transition into valleys and more of a flatlands. The Atlas Mountains, which are a very famous chain of mountains along the Maghreb region, they dominate the central part of the country. And it separates the desert from the more fertile lands up north, really.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The more you go to the west, I mean, Algeria also has some mountains, and then in Morocco, it's really, really like hilly in an extreme way, right? You wouldn't.
Yes.
You always think, Sahara, but no, it's really. Really dominated by the mountains.
Yeah. I mean, I personally think, and my perception might be biased just because of my love for the nation. I think we got very lucky with the landscape, because we've got 2 coastal lines, we've got the Sahara Desert, you've got the mountains, and the more warmer inside cities, sort of to speak.
So it's a very diverse.
Yeah, I think there is a wide area of landscapes to be enjoyed for whomever is interested.
And from which part of Morocco do you originate?
I was born and I was raised in Rabat, which is the capital.
Rabat, okay.
However, both of my parents, my mom is from Essaouira, which is more towards the south.
Okay.
And my dad is more from the Atlas Mountains region.
So Rabat, you also said, is like the capital. Is it also the most important or relevant city? Because I always, when I'm sure many other Europeans think of Morocco, you always have Casablanca. Casablanca is always our first association. But maybe, what are the big places?
So Casablanca is pretty famous, and I mean, it has the right to be famous because it's the largest city in Morocco.
It is the largest, okay.
Yeah, it has a total population of what, 3.4, about 3.4 million people, and the city is quite old as well. It dates back to the 7th century with Berbers and indigenous ethnic tribes there, and it was at some point their capital towards those centuries. However, we've got a couple of big cities as well that don't get as much credit. There is Fes, which is the second largest city in Morocco. Yeah. It has a very interesting history, and it was a thriving center for the Jewish community in earlier historical times. It was one of the imperial cities of ancient Morocco and a popular commercial center as well. And right now it is part of the UNESCO's World Heritage. So yeah, just a side note on that, I think there are about 8 or 9 sites that are protected by the UNESCO in Morocco, and that is an archaeological site called Volubilis, which dates back to the Roman area. There is the city of Meknes. There is Essaouira, where I am originated from. There is Fez, which we're talking about at the moment, which is the second largest city. Then there is Tangier, which is the third largest city in Morocco, and that's up in the north. Tangier is more closer to Spain. And fun fact, actually, the closer you get to Spain, people tend to take Spanish as a second language more than French.
So, you already said, so French is still the dominant second, I mean, next to Arabic, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say Berber and Arabic, are sort of a tie in the first place, and they're also officially the official languages of the country. Wow. However, the second most spoken language is French, and it's we officially grow up as bilingual. We study French in schools as well from the primary going onwards, and higher education as well is in French. But, however, in certain areas of the country, and obviously out of choice sometimes as well, people tend to speak Spanish. So the more you go up north, the more likely you are to find people speaking more Spanish than French as a second language, which is, I think, an interesting side of how the geography and history impacts the culture of the country.
So you learn Berbic and Arabic just by yourself or by your family, and in school it's exclusively French, or is there also like a language?
Berber is not taught in schools. However, they are actually in discussion of how to implement the language as well in the education system. But at the moment, it's not officially taught in schools. Arabic is, French is from the primary levels to the end of your high school education, I assume, and then you are taught English as well as a third language.
Wow! Or at the fourth, even, I mean, for some Berbic speakers, it's impressive. Well.
However, I know for fact there are certain high schools, they're public high schools, where you get to choose your third language. So some people would go for Spanish. And funny enough, a lot of people are going for German these days as well.
Ah, nice. Nice. Last but not least, there you go.
You guys, I mean, I don't know if you remember or not, but I took a year of German at some point.
You did? Wow.
Yes, I did. I mean, I wasn't the best at it, and that's all my fault.
But I mean, after 3 other or 4 other languages, it must get really confusing, right? Like, it's impressive. And you obviously picked up English very well now, so it's a multilingual spot. So but maybe to get a bit better of an idea, you said Berbic is everybody speaking it, or is it the part of the population which has the Amazigh kind of Berbic background, or how is the population maybe in terms of the composition?
So not everybody speaks Berber. Only descendants of Berber ethnicities or origins on the first place. Secondly, I think it's more of a choice nowadays for people to start speaking Berber because they're getting more interested in their ethnic backgrounds. And obviously, it's very rare to find actually people who are only Arab descendants, because the nation was built upon this multicultural exchange between the two. So more and more people are speaking Berber, I'd say, and especially with this tendency towards and the program of implementing Berber in the public schools as well.
Yeah.
I think it's increasing the popularity of the language. And I mean,
so it's
I
like the
love
natives basically Berber. The Amazigh Berbers are the
yes,
native
absolutely.
population, and then at some point the Arabs came
Exactly.
in.
So Morocco has been inhabited by Berbers since at least the last 5,000 years.
Wow.
Some actually estimate the presence of Berbers in the area for 8,000 years, which is it's astonishing. And the oldest sovereign state in Morocco is the Berber Kingdom of Mauritania, which was the capital was in Morocco, and that's 110 years before Christ. I mean,
damn.
That
So
goes way back.
those ties go deep back, but then the Muslims, how much, or not the Muslims, of course, I mean, the Arabs in that case, how much of the population do they make up now, or is it so mixed that you can't really divide it anymore into ethnic groups?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to say who are the Berbers and who are the Arabs, just because it has all been interrelated and intermixed throughout time. However, I mean, you can trace back certain families to certain regions, but to trace the ethnicity is a very difficult thing.
Yeah, of course.
So I was talking about the biggest cities, right? And I was
yes, exactly. Yes, I'm sorry. I always jump in when I'm thinking of a question that comes up to my mind. So, but it's good. You keep the structure. Yeah, you're the one in charge. That's nice.
So I was going to say, although Rabat is known to be the capital, but it actually comes. It's definitely not in the top 5 of the biggest cities. We've got Casablanca, Fez, where actually, fun fact, the oldest university in the world is in Fez.
In the world, wow.
In the world. And after that, we've got Tangier, Marrakesh. Who doesn't know Marrakesh?
I think, many people associate it maybe as a touristic destination, I think, Marrakesh.
Definitely.
It's a catchy name.
Absolutely. It's got a population of under 1 million, and it's obviously one of the most famous cities of Morocco. It's where the legendary Yves Saint Laurent used to reside. And that's where we've got the Jardin de Majorelle, which are the gardens of that Yves Saint Laurent built, and where his ashes were spread as well when he died, out of choice. And then we've got Saleh, which is a city that is it's the 5th largest city in Morocco by population. It's one of the cities that is known for its Berber roots dating back to the thousands, and it's very close to Rabat. Really, there's a river separating the two. And then after that, we've got the city of Meknes, which is one of Morocco's 4 imperial cities. And then last place is Rabat, which is the capital of Morocco. It's also the 7th largest city of the country, and its population is around 580,000. It's also UNESCO World Heritage Site. A couple of cities are actually protected by the UNESCO due to the historic value and the monuments as well.
But that's quite a random pick then, right, for political capital? Or was it by purpose to maybe decentralize the power from the big cities? Or, I mean, it's rather unintuitive to have the smallest out of those 7 to be the capital.
I believe there are a couple of reasons behind the choice of Rabat as the capital. First of all, change of dynasties, change of reign as well. Take different centers as the capital, and also the reason why Casablanca is one of the biggest cities is also due to the fact that it's a commercial hub. Lots of big companies are there, lots of industrial big entities are there as well, whereas Rabat is regarded as the political capital. So it sort of incorporates all the departments. The parliament is there, the residency of the king is there. So it's there is a sort of a logic behind separating the 2 words as well.
Okay. I mean, of course, we speak about the Kingdom of Morocco. I forgot. So it's also home to both, not only the let's say political hierarchies, but also to the kingdom house. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the last kingdoms in Africa, I think, the Moroccan one.
It's actually the the second oldest dynasty in the world at
In
the
the world.
moment.
Okay, wow.
After Japan's
Windsor?
imperial
Ah, the
family.
Japanese. Okay.
Yes.
Even older than
I'm
the Brits. Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I know, right? I was
There you
very
go.
much surprised.
And
It's very interesting also to understand that the political framework in Morocco is placed in a dynamic of parliamentary constitutional monarchy.
yeah,
Whereby the Prime Minister of Morocco is the head of government, and of a multi-party system. There is an executive power that is exercised by the government, and there is a legislative power which is vested
yeah.
in both the government and the two chambers of parliament. And I just want to point out that we've got a lot of changes that have happened as a referendum after the Arab Spring movement, where the power was given more towards the parliament than other parties of the political framework.
Interesting. So, but I mean, the king, I didn't hear him in your small overview. He's not really present or powerful in the political landscape anymore. So he's more
No,
representative.
he's very much present. It's also important to note that in Morocco, the king is not only a political figure but also a religious figure, because he's also a descendant of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. So he's also named Prince of the Muslims. So it's a double role. It's a religious and a political role as well. So the constitution grants the king extensive power. He's both the secular political leader and the commander of the faith.
Yeah.
However, there is also much power given to the government and the parliament due to the referendum, to empower people more and to obviously sustain and reinforce democracy in the country.
But in general, I mean, you said it yourself now, the Arab Spring's impact, it at least to my understanding, it wasn't that much hit by the movement. I mean, not to an extent where people see countries like Tunisia or Libya or even Syria be involved.
Yes.
It still happened there, but it was to a smaller extent, right?
Yes, absolutely. We've had manifestations, we've had people go on strike and demands raised. However, I think the difference was the approach of the political entities towards those demands. We thankfully had a more of a listening ear, so lots of the demands were taken into consideration. Hence the referendum, which actually changed lots of the legislation in Morocco in terms of, for example, power. The king has given more power to the parliament and more power to the people to decide for themselves. But lots of changes have been happening in terms of human rights, or in terms of women rights, in terms of equality and job opportunities. So it's safe to say that the country is in movement. It's in change.
Smart move. Yeah, he was
it's a
quick
process.
enough to listen. Yeah, that's probably what the others could have also avoided the collapse with. Yeah, it's but I mean, now we jump back 5 years, but maybe if we 7 years by now, I think. If we go through the history, maybe let's start from scratch. You also mentioned some of the historic citizens as the Berbers 8,000 years ago, but was there also some other, let's say, historical population, or that some other ethnicities that used to live in Morocco, or has it more or less been always dominated by these Amazigh Berbic tribes?
I mean, I think it was always dominated by the Amazigh tribes. However, under different dynasties and under different empires, the landscape or the demographics have changed as well. Under the Romans, it was a different fabric of the society.
The Romans were there, okay. So, but then only, I mean, not to the full size of Morocco, right? Probably just around the Mediterranean.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the maps of the world have changed so many times,
yes.
And with it, borders have changed as well. So under the Romans, it was a different empire with different borders. Then there was the Kingdom of Mauritania as well, where the borders were a bit cut off towards the end as well, at the bottom of the map, as well. And the different dynasties, and with the influence of the Arabs as well. And then we've had French protectorate, and then we've had Spanish colonialism as well. And then the aftermath of those as well have left borders sort of uncertain, and then has shaped the demographics as well. But it has been, and it has always been majoritively populated by the Berbers.
Interesting. I mean, you say also French protectorate. It seems to be that they left a very large impact then, right? If French is still seen as such a major language, then that time was probably the longest, or by my naive intuition, or how to which extent was it dominated by the French?
So obviously imperialism always leaves a major footprint on any land it touches, really.
Yes.
And Morocco definitely isn't the exception. We've had French protectorate, which obviously left an impact on the country. We speak French majoritively as well. France has contributed to the construction of lots of how do you say that? Lots of infrastructure and transportation in Morocco. It had the country was the first to implement the railways in Morocco.
Yeah, I heard about that. It's very well accessible by train, right? Like you can really go through the country.
Today, Morocco has one of the most developed systems of infrastructure in Africa because of that French colonialism as well.
You still had to maintain it, right? I mean, it's not God-given that persists. I see it from countries like the Congo.
We've recently launched the high-speed train, which now interrelates Tangier to Rabat in about an hour. Whereas it used to take about 5 hours driving, which I think is
especially with the
phenomenal.
mountains. That must be very complicated, right, to have direct access.
And the network of the railway has spread a lot as well. So we're pretty much well interconnected in terms of transportation and
very
infrastructure.
Important.
But that has obviously been prompted by French protectorate as well. It's very important to give credit when credit is due. So
did they just substitute one another? Was there like some Spanish-French conflict which led to the change of domination, or how did that come to place then that the Spanish all of a sudden became such a dominant power?
I think it's very difficult to say, really. Both nations wanted a share of the country very badly, and that is due to the resources of the country as well, because Morocco had a lot to provide as well in terms of natural resources, and agriculture is more than 20% of the country's economy. It's a very fertile land. So both countries wanted a share of Morocco. At some point they had a conflict, but then they also ended up sharing different parts of the country as well. So Spain, for example, was the one that was responsible for the sub-Sahara region. And took most of the northern part of the country, whereas France was more lots of in the middle and towards along the lines of the mountains, really.
And that is also then those areas which are still until now more French dominated, and the other ones still a bit more Spanish speaking.
Yes, absolutely. Back to the point I've said earlier, the more you go towards the north, the more people tend to speak Spanish more than French. Spanish substitutes the French, really.
And they also, I saw it on the map, I mean, the Spanish, they still have like a dozen of places they still conquered on there, right?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Melilla are still occupied by Spain. It is what it is at the moment. Morocco still has there is still a conflict in certain places that is yet to be solved. But yes, at some point,
it's not like islands or anything. It's like it's completely part of the land, just cut off at the coast, right? It's like just let me take this and protect it, and this and this.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
That map is funny sometimes. There are still a couple of areas that are still under Spanish governance, but are still much part of the country, really.
I mean, it must be interesting, especially in our times, where like all the discussion is going about the defense of Europe, and they try to save themselves from African migration. And those are
Yes.
the actual borderlines then within the Moroccan
Yes.
country, right? It's really absurd.
Absolutely. Which is one of the reasons why the country's cooperation with Europe has always been known to be really outstanding, because we share that close of the borders. I mean, you can go to Spain in 30 minutes from Morocco, which is astonishing. When I say this to my friend, it always amazes them how close we are to Europe. So because we share those borders, and we're also known to be the door to Africa. So there's lots of migration to Europe through the country, which is the reason why we maintain really good political relations with mainly Spain and France.
I guess it's also the location, right? I mean, all ships that will have to go to to America, I think the main passage is above Morocco, right? So everyone who wants to get to Africa needs to at some point land first in Casablanca also.
Absolutely. Or transcend through the Sahara region, which used to be actually the gold trade route. A couple of years ago.
Indeed. I remember in the Mali episode we had the Kingdom of Mali, which was trans-Saharan trade domination back then, right? And
absolutely.
Developed. And now with that location regarding the Atlantic, is there also like a tie to American countries, or I mean, or is it more or less?
Definitely. I mean, Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States as a country.
Oh wow!
Which is a fun fact. Yes.
Interesting.
And we were the first ones to sort of officially say that any ships coming from the US are protected under our Navy as well. In our law. So we do have really strong ties with
powerful friends. Is it still until the present day you would say that the US and Morocco have some deeper connections than maybe other African countries?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of history there, right? When a country is the first one to recognize you as an independent state, there will always be history there.
Especially when it's democratic in the case of the US.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
exactly. So I think we still have good relations with the US and with many different countries. We have actually fantastic relations with the Middle East and the US at the same time. However, we do have certain standpoints, and that doesn't impact our diplomacy. To be honest.
Interesting. I mean, now speaking of the US independency, when was then the official independency of Morocco?
It was in late 1955 when Mohammed V, which is the grandfather of the ruling king, successfully negotiated the resolution of Moroccan independence.
So he was always in charge. Technically, this family was always.
Yes, and I think that's the whole concept of the protectorate. Really, you're not a colony. However, you are under the responsibility of that other country. You do follow their rules, and they sort of set the political, economic, or social framework, but you have the independence to rule on your own. So the Alawite dynasty, which is the ruling family at the moment.
Alawi. I think that name I've heard before. So that's the one who are the second oldest in the world. Alawi.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Alawi.
Yes. Which are descendants of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. So they've always been the ruling family, even through the French protectorate and Spanish protectorate as well.
Interesting. So Morocco, in that definition of protectorate, always had some more of a sovereignty under, of course, like a soft form of colonialism overall, but it was more or less still more self-driving than maybe other colonies.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly.
And independence 55, I mean, that's now roughly 64 years. Was it seen in a positive light? Because, I mean, unfortunately, some part of the discoveries I've made in this podcast so far has been that in many, many countries, the independence came very fast, but then was dominated by, let's say, military coup d'etats or civil wars. How has the last 65 years been so far, would you say, in terms of an independent Morocco?
I think we've been lucky enough because of the presence of the monarchy throughout the colonialism years, and even afterwards, they sort of kept the country stable. So we've had a really good phase of being independent. I mean, we're still a very young nation if you take everything into consideration. 56 years ago is not much, really. But we've been doing a great job. We've been working hard. I think it's been quite stable, and there's been an open dialogue between the monarchy and the people, which obviously helped throughout more tense times like the Arab Spring. But I'd say we haven't really had a turbulent period. Obviously, there has been history known events of coup d'etats or attempts of coup d'etats, actually. But we've always managed to come back on top and sort of handle everything.
Interesting. But has it always been a democracy, or was that also a form of development that the king had to give some power to the people?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, since the state has put together its legislation, it has always proclaimed to be a democracy. But obviously, with time, freedoms and rights change as it does throughout the world. I mean, we've seen incredible and amazing changes in terms of human rights and women rights and equality and gender equality and discrimination. So we've been trying, obviously, the speed might not be as fast as other countries, but it's very important to take into considerations that these are very complex people. This is a very complex ethnicities with a very strong impact of the Arab, and we have to sort of find a balance between religion and ethnicity and tradition and history as well. So I mean, I personally hope we go faster. Just a bit of a nudge would help sometimes. But yeah, democracy has evolved a lot, and one of the impacts of it, or one of the ways we can see it, is those changes to the referendum, to the legislation we've seen lately.
Absolutely. And also maybe one last question about the young Moroccan country, because I see it in Algeria, or I mean, to some extent you could say it for maybe also Egypt or Libya. Was there also some tendencies of a more socialist leaning time, or has it always been more or less pro-Western in terms of the Cold War? Was it more or less always on the same, let's say, global political side, or how did it come along the last 50 years? Because they were in war with Algeria, right? I mean, I remember Algeria was back then, for example, with Ben Bella and Boumediene, they were more or less anti-Western leaning, right? So
yes,
curious to see.
We've never been actually in war with Algeria. I don't.
No? Okay.
No, it has never been a war.
Problems.
Really.
Sorry,
but
problems.
The borders, right? The borders
exactly.
have been closed.
That was it then. That was it.
Yes.
Border
so
conflict.
The borders have been closed at some point because of the tensions that were going on. The borders have been closed, and obviously the Sahara question has always taken a central place in the stage as well in those relations. But we've recently, the king has actually 2 or 3 years ago, in a formal speech, he has openly opened the dialogue with Algeria to sort of resolve the problem.
Because Algeria is on the other side in that conflict, so to say.
We share borders with Algeria and Mauritania at the bottom. So Algeria is actually our only neighboring country from the right hand side, really.
I mean, that's a very. Just let me maybe introduce that topic. It's very interesting, Sahara, and I also need to be careful because my podcast is called, for all of your friends or other Moroccans listening to the podcast, it's called 55 Countries, 55 Weeks, 55 episodes. It's not because I'm a big believer in the Bolsonaro movement. I didn't choose this title out of that determination. It's more catchy than 54. Let's be honest. So I was always very curious because in my I was a big geography nerd as a young kid, and in my atlas, so to say, the books with the maps always had this white spot in the Sahara, and I could never find any information on that spot. I was always like it grinded my gears, so to say. So I'm very happy now we can finally talk a bit about what is going on south of Morocco there.
Yes, so just to put things in perspective, since 1975, when Spain withdrew from its century-long colonial domination of the region, which was then called the Spanish Sahara, actually.
Okay.
The Western Sahara has been an area of conflict between Morocco and the Algerian-backed Polisario Front. So we've never actually had problems with Algeria. We've obviously experienced issues with Algeria backing the Polisario Front because we claim the right to that region, and that's logical, that's understandable to sort of have that tension. But in 1991, a ceasefire was declared by the UN. We've had a UN peacekeeping mission there since then, and the United Nations in Western Sahara Committee was always present in there to sort of monitor the tensions. So we've never actually had a war, sort of speaking, like an armed face-to-face confrontation. We've had moments where certain parts of the conflict have sparked sort of a bit of a higher tension.
But I mean, the country, I mean, going by the name West Sahara, it probably speaks for itself, right? It's not like a super attractive or like accessible place, right? It must be very desert-like, right?
It's the Western Sahara, I think, is the third largest desert in the world, and it's tough there, really. I mean, I've only seen parts of it. I've never been brave enough to go further because the weather conditions are, it's tough.
Yeah, it
it's
must be.
Very hot, it's very dry, and
no mountains probably, right?
No, absolutely not, unless you count desert dunes as mountains, because they're very tall. It's very tough there, but there is when a country feels like it has a claim to that part, it doesn't really matter in terms of weather circumstances, but it's that feeling of being whole again, if that makes sense. And that's actually the question of the Sahara is very popular in the country, in Morocco. Like, people feel very, very, very strongly about it. It's like a part of them that feels like has been taken away. But the country has always proceeded in a very diplomatic way. We've never encouraged war or tension. We've always, in an effort to break the political impasse, we've addressed the humanitarian crisis by always taking our strength or our instructions from the UN mainly. So we've always tried to open the dialogue and find a more peaceful solution.
But I mean,
we came up in
go ahead.
So, in 2007, I believe, we came up with an autonomy plan for the territory under which the Sahara region would have independent sort of rule, but under the Moroccan sovereignty. And we've been investing a lot in there, in the region, to be honest.
So like a protectorate. No, I'm kidding.
Not really. We wouldn't be protecting them, because we've also had a vote there for the people to vote what they would want for their future to be, and that's not that's actually what we didn't have with the protectorate system. We've never been asked what we wanted.
No, of course. I mean, I was just
yes. We've came up with an autonomy plan that they approved, that the UN approved, that we are very open to talk about. We've invested lots of money in terms of social programs and economic programs as well. I think I don't really know the figures, but it's astronomical. It's said to be around the billions of dollars, which is it's very considerable considering the economy of the country in itself. I hope we come to a very peaceful solution, and as we've always stated, and as we've recently stated as well, we are very open to dialogue. And funny enough, lately there was a petition by intellectuals, by Algerian intellectuals, who wanted to open the borders with Morocco, and that is amidst, we've had the Africa Cup lately, right?
Yeah.
When Algeria won, because obviously we share lots of history, we're same population. We're the same ethnicity. We've had the same sort of history of both been occupied by France. We
both have
both
Amazigh ethnicities
yes.
as well.
So
Yeah,
when Algeria won, there were Moroccans with Algerian and Moroccan flags who went to the Algerian borders to sort of support Algeria. And we've always felt like brothers and sisters in terms of the people in themselves. So as a counterpart, Algerian intellectuals are signing this petition to open the borders with Morocco, which I think is a huge step in diplomacy towards open conversation, really.
But then you would say, out of this good relationship, the only still small piece of doubt comes from this dispute in the Western Sahara, right? Because I'm just from my understanding, I thought at least that Algeria until now is like the safe haven for all of the Polisario. I mean, those are the independent fighters against Morocco. They still have protection in Algeria, right?
Yes. So Polisario is a front that is backed by Algeria. But Algeria in itself has no claim to the Western Sahara, not officially at least. Okay.
They just support.
Support the Polisario, and from my understanding, Polisario is a how would I describe it? It's a people who assembled from the Western Sahara and decided they wanted autonomy as a state in itself.
And maybe one question just to get. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. It's just to say, I think it's one of the impacts of Spain leaving the region without defining the border.
I was just going to ask you, what did Spain do when they left? I mean, they were head of the party. If you leave the party, somebody's in charge, right?
Yes, but not this time. I don't think it happened. So when Spain left, it was up to Morocco and Algeria to define the borders. And obviously Morocco had a stronger claim. So an independent group called Polisario was backed by Algeria in their claim to the area.
So it was left for discussion. So anyone...
Yes, exactly.
Problematic. Yeah. And also, I mean, the border between the Western Sahara and Mauritania is also pretty large. Is there also some ties with Mauritania in that conflict, or is it solely between the Polisario, Morocco, and...
It's solely between Polisario and Morocco at the moment. Okay. There is no conflict, no tensions between Morocco and Mauritania. They're actually very supportive of our cause. So yeah.
But maybe to sum it up a bit, in the status quo, the country is somewhat split. Then, like there's an influence sphere of Morocco and the influence sphere of Polisario, or how can you imagine now the status quo? Maybe how it looks like.
I think obviously there is an influence of both. However, it's very important to note which parties are taking the appropriate steps towards resolving the conflict, because I feel the world doesn't need one more conflict, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is a conflict that's been going on for over 60 years. I mean, it's time to get over it. So we're more sort of focused towards resolving this conflict. We've been coming up with solutions, some of which have been fully approved and backed by the UN, which is, the greatest entity out there for peacekeeping.
Well, but the UN don't, sorry if I interrupt you, but that's, for me, was interesting. The AU is the only one who recognizes it, right? The UN doesn't even recognize Western Sahara. So obviously they are, from a Western Sahara point of view, not really the right body of politics, I'd assume, right?
I don't really know, but I know for sure that the UN is backing up peacekeeping plans, and the sovereignty plan and the independence sort of state plan that is under the Moroccan sovereignty, which I think is actually a step forward. I mean, it doesn't have to be the final solution, but it's very important to advance the discussion towards.
40 years of conflict, goes nowhere, right?
Yes.
It's a messy situation. I'm gonna stay open-minded about it and curious, because I think it's not really in any discussion. I mean, we all have this land dispute with Kashmir or Palestine, but there's a big. They have like somewhat few 100,000 people who are not sure where to live or where to belong. It's
exactly. Who are currently living in camps set up by the UN as well.
In camps,
which is unfair. Obviously,
absolutely.
if you're offered better circumstances elsewhere, who wouldn't want to settle down, really?
Definitely.
So I really hope we come to a solution very soon, because it's not in the benefit of either parties.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a controversial topic. Thank you very much for the insight on that. And maybe to go to some more, let's say, positively connotated areas. I saw Morocco is actually, in terms of Africa at least, very good in terms of the GDP. I was looking into like the per person income is like in the top 5 of African nations. So economically, it has been going well these years since independence, I'd assume, right?
Yes, absolutely. Economically, we've been doing great. We're very happy about it. We've had a total of exports that is more than 23 million in thousands of US dollars.
Okay.
Which is astronomical, I think, for a country that struggled with climate change and political tensions, and obviously all those regimes that have shaped the fabric of the society. So it's looking quite positive at the moment, with agriculture being our main sector.
Agriculture is the main sector. Okay. It makes sense, right? With such a diverse geography. A lot of farming.
And obviously, tourism is taking more of an important place as we go on and as we develop the country. Because this saying that Morocco is an open, how would you say? It's an open space that is in construction, really. So we still consider ourselves as in construction. We're still working, building this country that would take advantage of its landscape and its agriculture and promote tourism. We've been trying to promote tourism a lot more lately. And we've also, it helps sometimes the political stability.
Exactly, right? It's peaceful. I mean, that's very attractive for many people, I'm sure, to visit.
It's a selling point for most people to come and see Morocco, which is also a door to Africa and Europe. We've been marked as one of the safest countries in Africa. So we are green and good to go by the UN, which is I think it's a happy news considering the political tensions that are going on at the moment in the region. So yes.
And what is for me so fascinating, and I mean, if we talk about tourism, that, I mean, you said it yourself, all these big cities are more or less like decentralized. So there's a lot of places different to see, not like maybe in Egypt where most people would go for the Nile Delta, or Cairo, that's it, or even maybe Algeria. Most people don't know much except Algiers maybe. But here you have all these cities all over the country. So with a good transportation system, this is actually... incentive for many travels, right? You can see every time something else.
Yes, that's definitely. It's actually a policy of the government to decentralize the different regions of the country, give each its rightful right and credit, and promote each region and work on each region separately to sort of build the country all together, and not discriminate or separate certain areas. Like even the Western Sahara, where the conflict is at the moment, is not a forgotten region of the country. We still send aid. We still have allocated government budgets towards the region as well.
Cool.
And it's very interesting. I think when a country recognizes its strength points, we do know that one of our major strengths is our geography and diverse landscape. So it's very important to promote these as well. If you want to come to Morocco, you would know that, for example, in wintertime, there is the city called Ifrane, which is also referred to as the Switzerland of Africa. If you Google it, it's amazing. In wintertime, it looks like Switzerland, with the peak points of mountains with snow, and the triangular shaped houses with the pointy bits. I don't know.
Really nice. So it's like you can actually go to a skiing resort even.
Oh yeah, definitely. There are very famous skiing resorts there.
In North Africa.
And at the same time, it's very funny because at the same time you would have this region that is covered with snow and has large spaces of forests that have actually wild animals sometimes as well, with boars there you can hunt or not hunt.
Watch.
And you've also got these big coastal lines with very warm cities, and Marrakesh with its very sunny and heated atmosphere. And you also can go to the south and enjoy a more relaxed time with star nights in the desert, which is fascinating. So it's a melting pot. Sorry, of not only ethnicities but also landscape, I'd say.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Maybe it's something you said already with the export. It's very connected with the world, obviously, right? With the location in the Atlantic and also Mediterranean. Who would you say is still, though, the biggest maybe economic partner of Morocco? Like, is there still the French, or is it the Spanish, or who's like still in the let's say in the economic perspective, who's still the most present international partner? Or maybe Algeria? I don't know.
I think it depends on the sector as well, whether it's agriculture or industry or services such as tourism or retail or offshoring or finance but it's safe to say that France remains the main sort of entity.
Big brother, maybe, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. We maintain really close friendships because both countries benefit economically from each other in terms of trade and investment. Actually, the majority of Moroccans who live outside of Morocco live in France. I think it's about
not Spanish. Okay,
30,000 or something like that, which is considerably high.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've been, I think lately also, the country's strategy and the government's strategy has been more focused towards South-South cooperation, which is the country investing more and more in Africa. We've been building hospitals. We've been investing in terms of companies and IT technology and information in Africa more because, I mean, as the rest of the world, we all see the potential in the country and we all recognize what it can offer if granted the right circumstances. So yeah, we still maintain our relations with Europe. There is history there with France and Spain, but it's very important also sometimes to turn around and see what's next to you or behind you.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe from my perspective, also in Germany, Morocco is present, and I would say absent of things like the tourism industry or some results of the Arab Spring. Two main stereotypes, let me tell you, is one is the fishing sector, so that there's a lot of let's say fish or shrimp or a lot of products that are from France, from Morocco, of course. And the second one is the hashish industry. So those are the main exports Germans at least associate, I think, when they speak about Morocco. It's still both very unique there, right? You have all the borders with the sea and all the fish, and at the same time the Atlas Mountains, where marijuana plants, or in the case hashish, is grown, right? So it's quite diverse.
I think it's safe to say that both stereotypes or claims don't come from absurdity. I mean, there is something there, obviously. There, as the French say, there is no smoke without fire. So I say the fishing industry in Morocco is quite known for two main reasons. I'd personally say, or three. Firstly, it's because we've got two coastal lines, the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, which sort of reinforces the diversity of our fishing industry.
Salt and non-salt, right? So you have also kind of water.
So nice, exactly. So the diversity and the biodiversity of the fishing industry is very high. And second of all, it's very. I think we cannot have a discussion about Morocco without discussing the food. I mean, we're quite known for the food, right? Some claim we're the second best cuisine in the world.
Who claims that? It must be very subjective.
Ranking websites. But
you mean after whom?
Well, France comes first for some. Japan comes second for some, and Italy. There is a dispute there, but it's safe to say we're one of the best. I mean,
it must be very diverse, yeah. If you speak about so many different areas, it's
exactly. I mean, if you think of a country that's that fertile, with a diversity of coastlines and a diversity of ethnicities, it's only fair to say that the cuisine would be very diverse and would tailor to a very wide range of palates. So I think having those two coastlines and having a quite a worldly recognized cuisine sort of puts forward that fishing industry image, but it's also I mean, it's quite fair to say also that fishing is a big part of our exports as well. It's 2.84% of our total exports.
Wow, only fishing. That's, I think, very large.
Fishing. And for a long time, it has been one of the main pillars of the economy of the country. It is considered the largest fish market in Africa. Which obviously, I mean, it doesn't come from nothing really. It's that diversity that we have, and the ability and the resources that are contained within the country and the coastal lines of the country. Now, coming to the second point, which is the hashish. I mean, in terms of figures, we are one of the 3 top exporters of the plant. I think it's 70%. Is provided. I think there was a figure of 70%. I think it was
of all European. I think of all European.
Yes, exactly. Of all. Yes, exactly.
That's impressive.
And then again, it comes back to the land being fertile, and the 70% that is exported to Europe. It's safe to. It's important to note as well that it's legally produced. However, the use that is made of that is no responsibility of ours.
No, it's up to the individual, right?
But yeah, the land is very fertile for the marijuana plant, and the legislation is sort of changing worldwide with regards to the plant and the uses of it. So it'd be very interesting to see if it shapes in the country and how it would actually impact the economy.
But wait, just to clarify, the farmers who grow it do it illegally, or is it
no, it's allowed? The 70% that is exported to Europe is legally grown.
Okay.
However, it's also, I mean, it's also very important to say that large quantities are illegally grown, and that is a big issue that the country is working on in terms of illegal transportation and export of marijuana, which if not legally sort of put in a framework, it could cause obviously lots of problems.
Absolutely.
So we are known for that, and there is a reason for that. It's because
quality speaks for itself. Yeah, I mean, not like everybody could do this, I'm sure.
And funny enough, there's also one more thing that is pretty much only grown in Morocco, and that is the argan plant, which argan oil is made of, which is a very big component lately in cosmetics and everything that has to do with health, and it's a very good substituent to other oil options, so to say.
Interesting.
So argan oil is a very interesting thing to check, because up till now no other country's been able to grow it.
Wow.
There has been some attempts, if I remember correctly, in Israel, which has worked to some extent, but we're still the first and biggest exporter of this, if I can say, amazing plant, actually, because I love every single dish that is made with argan oil.
Argan oil, I keep that in mind. I haven't heard so far.
You have to check it.
Alternative to olive. That's very nice. And then maybe now to get, I mean, we did get a full perspective from the country of Morocco, but maybe then also now, I mean, I always find it interesting to speak to a person that has moved out of the country for a longer time now. I mean, in your case, even I think 3 years. So how did maybe also your perception living in UK, where I assume there's not too much of a Moroccan, let's say, community also, expats, yes, exactly. I was missing the right word. Did it also change your perception of the country?
I think in general in life, once you sort of put a distance between you and something that you've always taken for granted, you start valuing it more, which was the case for me. I mean, I love Britain, and I'm very thankful for the learning opportunities England has given me, and obviously the job opportunity as well. And I've been learning so much on a professional and personal level in England. But it's safe to say Morocco will always have a soft spot in my heart. I've recognized a sense of belonging, and I've recognized a sense of love for my nation that I wasn't aware of when I was in the country. Obviously, you start to spot certain differences, like, for example, the food subject.
Oh my God! Don't talk about
me.
UK food. It's
England
miserable.
is a very great country. It's not known for its food. But yeah, I miss those things, and obviously there are certain holidays because of my faith and my ethnicity that I don't get to celebrate. So you miss those things. I start valuing different things in life, if that makes sense. And
Absolutely.
My perception of the country has actually changed because I wasn't aware of the extent to which we were actually able to export the brand made in Morocco, which was really fascinating to me, because it is actually perceived in other places as a brand that speaks for organic stuff, mostly for quality produce, which is, I mean, obviously I'm very proud and happy for that. So I was able to experience firsthand when I go to the supermarket and I see something that's made in Morocco, or something that is of good quality, or that is sourced or farmed in a very responsible way, that has the label made in Morocco, which was actually now made into a trademark.
Interesting.
Obviously, I mean, I sort of, it changed my perspective because I only knew things on my country's level. I didn't know how we were perceived elsewhere.
And you also get identified with that label then, right? I mean, because not voluntary, but obviously people will associate you to their stereotypes they have to Morocco. And in any case,
who told me, you're from Morocco, couscous, and I was like,
cool, yeah, that's the classic. True, I had mentioned couscous. Basic one.
But obviously, it's kind of nice to be associated with certain nice things. Now comes the part where there are actually certain people who don't associate you with the best of what your country has to provide, because of certain exceptions and certain events that have happened. Obviously, we're all saddened by them, but it doesn't speak for a nation, and it's very important to make the separation between the two.
But I mean, good or bad, I mean, of course, in best case, there would be no Islamophobic person and so on. But at least I think any exposure to that makes you think more, or maybe makes you associate yourself more, or think about more what you as a person from that country symbolize, or which, let's say, in a good way, ambassador effect you have on others.
Exactly. And that's a weight I always feel on my shoulders in my day-to-day life, because I work with so many people from different nationalities and backgrounds. I always have the feeling like I love this country that I come from so much that I feel the obligation to be the best representative in day-to-day behavior, in the way I carry myself, or the way I interact with people. It's everyone's responsibility to be the best ambassador they can be, really.
Yeah, that's a very positive message.
Yeah, that's what I've learned about me and my relationship with the country.
It helps. I'm telling everyone. I mean, for your case especially, I mean, there's so many nice aspects to think about, but it doesn't matter which country you're from. I think once you are not inside of the God-given environment anymore, then you'll naturally become more exposed.
And Freddie, I just want to point out one more thing is when you meet other people who come from Africa as well in a different country, like especially when I meet Algerians, for example, whom we are known to have a conflict with, for example. It's very interesting how these people feel like they're part of the same family, and every single political, social conflict or problem is immediately being ignored, and you feel like you've actually met someone from your family elsewhere. So there is a bridge that is constructed between the different backgrounds and the different ethnicities, which is amazing. and that is what humanity should be built around. It's
Absolutely.
those bridges.
I mean, take our example. We were technically, completely different backgrounds. Yeah, you guys from Morocco, Ibrahim and me from Germany. We had some girls from China as well, and everybody was completely shocked and exotic by the Moscow downtown. Yeah, so it unites you in a different way. That's
I mean, I would never forget that night ride we had to see all the lights in Moscow and how astonishing it was, and it was the same reaction for everybody.
Exactly.
I mean, regardless of where you come from, we all appreciate beauty the same way, and we all long for those experiences the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe now to finish with a more selfish question for me, because I'm getting, not only because of the podcast, but in general, much and more driven into the French language. And I had a language course last year in London, and will go for that purpose also to Paris. I'm trying to build there, and my not dream, but it doesn't need to be a dream because it's not that unrealistic. If I would choose a place within Morocco to learn French, which place would you, maybe not only for the quality of the French, but also for the quality of the city, recommend me maybe for a language course? What do you think would be a nice destination?
That's actually very difficult to say, because I haven't had the time to settle down in other different cities, but I'm going to speak for the ones I've had the chance to visit a couple of times. I would say it'd be very interesting to take a couple of classes in Casablanca. Because it is the largest city, but with that comes a very open perception of the world in general, and it's a city where you can see different people from different backgrounds and nationalities all trying to actually learn about the language and the country and the culture. So I think it would be very interesting, just because it would offer you, because of its large scale, it would offer you a more diverse.
Probably. I mean, they must have all the language institutes. I'm sure they are.
Tell me about it. I have a sister who speaks fluent Korean and another one who speaks fluent Spanish. I feel like I'm the black sheep of the family. So you can definitely learn anything you would want. But I would think that it would be very interesting, just because also when we had French colonialism, or French protectorate, they settled in Casablanca at a moment, and there is you see lots of the French influence in Casablanca in certain areas in terms of architecture in itself, and the way the city was built around all that infrastructure that was left behind by the French. So I think it would be a very interesting experience. And side note, there are fantastic French restaurants there as well. So
I already love the idea. Casablanca language month. That is something to wish for Christmas.
Yes, definitely.
Very nice. And even for others, I mean, I'm sure there's many people out there who are open to new languages. I think even for probably Arabic, this is an interesting place to also get some skill set to get.
I'd say if you're ever interested in Arabic, I'd say go to Fez or Meknes and try to secure a spot for just a session or something at the oldest university of the world. I mean, can you imagine how fantastic that would be?
That is truly
it's just
amazing. A great idea. Absolutely. Well, with that great outlook to future educational experiences, I want to thank you very much. I hope you still have a nice time in the UK. If you ever come, or if we happen to cross roads in be it Moscow, Germany, UK, or Morocco again.
When is the next tournament happening?
Unfortunately, the debating world has left me a bit. But I'll be in Paris soon for quite some time. So it's not that far from England, I guess. And let's see. I thank you very much. First of all, for taking the time, and I hope we got some people more interested in Morocco.
Oh, I hope so. And thank you very much for having me. Thank you for giving me a platform and an opportunity to speak about something that I hold very dear to my heart. And it's been a great joy to speak to you again. And I'm looking forward to see the end of this project.
Absolutely. There shall be no end, but the progress is always in view. And with that note, I'm wishing you a nice rest of the weekend, and looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Keep in touch.
Keep in touch. Bye. For sure. Bye, Jasmine.